Thank you all for attending. I'm Holly Pasquinelli, Senior Manager of PR and Communications here at Conner Prairie, and we are happy to see all of you here in person. And we are going to get started with Conner Prairie President and CEO, Norman Burns.
Thank you, Holly. I know that applause is actually for Holly. She did a great job, didn't she? Holly, thank you for all your efforts, and Andrew, you and your team for putting this annual meeting together. Just a stellar job. So good morning. That was just a little too weak. Good morning. There we go. That's more like it, because all of my colleagues that educate here, they're always trying to get that energy level up for the kids. I don't know if Brandy's in the room, but I saw Amy Murch. I know they're always, there's Brandy, and Amy's here somewhere. I know they're always getting the level up, so we want to make sure there's energy in the room. So welcome to the 2023 annual meeting. If you didn't know, my name is Norman Burns, and I'm President and CEO of Conner Prairie. Today, we're going to be sharing with you how last year we activated our future while also deepening our roots to bring even more value to our community and to our guests. It all starts actually with the core purpose or mission of Conner Prairie. So why do we exist? Because Conner Prairie is a unique, historic place. Way before mankind arrived, this land and river existed. After arriving, humans began to harness the power of the river and use the resources found on the land to first survive, and then follow their curiosity to create experiences that defined humanity. So what do we do with this unique place called Conner Prairie? We inspire curiosity and we foster learning. How do we do that? By providing engaging and individualized experiences. And who do we do that for? Everyone. I know what you're saying. Everyone, Norman? That's a tough thing to do. Well, we can provide these experiences for most people, and we're going to try. And it shouldn't be because we haven't tried. So we're always looking to do new things. That's why Conner Prairie has been actively listening to the community for quite a while, and then asking potential partners how we might be involved and be used as a resource for the work that they are doing. Engaging our guests where they want to be, talking to partners, and letting them engage us where they need to be. This engagement has better informed Conner Prairie programming so that it affects the well-being of a more diverse cross-section of our community. So, what do we do with this mission, and how do we express it through programming and operations? Well, I can tell you that Conner Prairie is becoming a national leader in reimagining how people view and use museums. And we are doing this by creating memorable, engaging, and innovative learning experiences that enhance well-being. Our keynote speaker today is going to be addressing the well-being of guests in museums, and we're really excited about that. Improving the emotional and physical well-being of our guests is paramount in Conner Prairie's future for our 1,046 acres of land and 3.3 miles of the White River. We are expanding the boundaries of our historical and natural resources by exploring, celebrating, and improving the human experience, the humanity we talked about earlier. But today's annual meeting is also about more than just last year's accomplishments. It's also a great time to say thank you. We could not create this value for our guests and activate Conner Prairie's future without the devotion and passion of the people represented in this very room this morning. Our staff, board leadership, volunteers, and donors. I would like to thank my colleagues on staff who bring our mission of inspiring curiosity and foster learning to our guests each and every day, and who truly embody our values of having a heart for the past, a head for the present, and an eye to the future. If you don't mind, Conner Prairie staff, would you stand up so everyone else can recognize you? And I want to tell you this morning, we will continue to strive to provide you with the tools needed and create an environment for you to express your passion for this mission. Also want to thank the Conner Prairie Museum Board for their leadership and our many donors and volunteers who have supported our many programs that serve our guests. Could our Conner Prairie Museum and Foundation board members, present and past, if you wouldn't mind standing. And for all of our donors and our volunteers that are in the room, you help keep Conner Prairie and other museums like us vibrant and engaging places that serve the community. You truly lift us up, and we thank you for this. After this morning's keynote address, you'll hear firsthand from community partners the impact of investing in our community as a restorative place for our visitors, and how we're opening the doors to a diversity of voices and inspiring curiosity and providing limitless experiences that bring people together. This morning's keynote address from Dr. John Falk, founder of the Institute for Learning Innovation, is about the value of museum experiences. He will be delving into his research about how positive experiences enhance well-being in the 4 primary categories of personal, intellectual, social, and physical well-being. But before the keynote address, let's hear from our board chair. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Steve Hageman, who's the chair of our Conner Prairie board. Steve.
Thank you, Norman. And on behalf of the board, thank you all for being here. It's a great morning, and isn't it nice that we can be in person and not on Zoom? Thank you, as Norman said, to my fellow board members. This is a great board. It's a very eclectic group. I've had the honor of serving on a number of boards over the years, but the diversity and this board is fantastic. And I think for a museum board, we just bring a lot of different talents. And I've had a chance to sit on some committee meetings the first 3 months of being board chair, and wow. There's a lot of heavy lifting done there, and it's just a great opportunity to serve this organization that we all love so much. All you contributors, thank you so much. It's your past giving. This doesn't happen without the finances and the financial support. Chris, thank you to you and your team. Jay, I know it's on the foundation board. You're great stewards of the endowment, the property, and it's those annual gifts that come through that really take Conner Prairie to a whole different level. You know, I was thinking, went home yesterday evening and flipped the TV on and went to the History Channel. I thought, you know, this is the group probably that we are ones that probably have more time on History Channel than most places. But Norman, the big thanks go to you and your team. You know, this all happens because of you. You got staff here, VPs here, all your cohorts and the volunteers. I know there's thousands and thousands of hours that folks come here and they spend time here and giving of their time and treasures and talents, and that doesn't go unnoticed by the board as well. So when I was watching the History Channel last night, being in the ag business and connected to the food industry through my career, I kind of like when they have the ones about the food that built America. And there was this guy by the name of Kathy from Georgia that came up with this nice chicken sandwich. And he put the A on the end because he thought it was better than everybody else's, the big A. Well, he got in business and he was supplying, most of you probably have watched this, but he was supplying Waffle House. Well, Waffle House decided they're in the waffle business. They're not in the chicken business, and the chickens were outselling the waffles. So what did he do? He started Chick-fil-A. If we go back a few years, we had a pandemic, and I remember being on those calls, and it was like, what do we do? Well, you did a great job, Norman and team, of keeping the wheels on the wagon. And I think a blessing in disguise as we look back, all the planning, all the new activities, all the things that Conner Prairie has in the works right now were really brought to a whole different level because of that situation. So I'm not saying Conner Prairie is going to be franchised in Chick-fil-A around the country. But what I will say, I'm extremely excited to be part of an organization that I think, because of all the things that are in the works and the pipeline of all the products and the projects that we have coming down, and how we're able to serve guests, not just here, but around our state, around our country, and around the world going forward. Conner Prairie could be an elite example of an outdoor museum that nobody's ever seen before. So I'm excited to be part of it. Thank you, all of you, for your support.
Thank you, Steve. That's very inspiring. You know, our aspirational goal is to change the way the world views and uses museums. And to what you're saying there, Steve, as we continue to do that, we hope that as we continue to plan and move forward, that we will be one of those museums that can actually change the world. And I think that's what Conner Prairie can do. We may not be franchised, but I hope that what Conner Prairie has learned, how we do our work, and how we talk to other museums will help others do that. And it just so happens that last night I had chicken and waffles. So how did you know I was going to eat chicken and waffles last night with that story? Sometimes there's coincidences out there, I guess. So once again, I want to thank you, Steve, for those inspiring words coming from our board of directors. It's now my pleasure, a very distinct pleasure, as a matter of fact, to introduce this morning's keynote speaker. Dr. John H. Falk is the founder of and currently the principal researcher at the Institute for Learning Innovation and is the Emeritus C. Grant Professor of Free Choice Learning at Oregon State University. Dr. Falk is the founding director of the STEM Research Center there. That's now there. His research focuses on study of learning in free choice learning settings with a particular focus on museums and ecotourism values is well known. He's a leading expert on free choice learning and is now known nationally for his work studying learning that occurs when people have significant choice and control over what, where, and the when of their learning. Dr. Falk, I have to say, I told you this yesterday and before, that your 1992 book, The Museum Experience, was a game changer for me. I had been in the profession about 5 years at that point, and I was trying to educate and trying to figure out, as a social historian, how do I develop programs, how do I lead an organization, and that book really impressed on me the value of museums and how we have to do things differently. And so I really appreciate that. You were really the first person to kind of give that visitor's eye to the museum experience and really revolutionize, I think, our profession. And I hope more and more museums across the country not only read that book, but the subsequent books and the new one that you're in the process of writing as well. The Museum Experience, the book from 1992, paints a thorough picture of why people go to museums, what they do while they're there, how they learn, and what museum practitioners can do to enhance these experiences. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Conner Prairie is doing. Dr. Falk's current research focuses on the community impact of museums, libraries, zoos, and aquariums. He is helping cultural institutions like Conner Prairie rethink their educational positioning in the contemporary era. Immediately following Dr. Falk's keynote address, you'll see firsthand the work we're doing in the community by viewing our 2022 Impact video. Dr. Falk is the recipient of many prestigious honors and awards and has been recognized around the world for his work and leadership. So please join me in welcoming Dr. John Falk.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here. And what a beautiful setting. Gosh. If I was sitting out there, I'd be looking not someplace else. But at any rate, so I'm going to not talk to you about Steve. I'm going to talk to you about the value of museum experiences. So, I've been sort of beginning this with a problem, and this is a problem that I've been thinking about for a number of years. Museums are thought of worldwide, and particularly in the United States, as really nice places, but not necessary places. And it was the pandemic sort of helped to emphasize it. Well, we weren't going to close the hospitals, but we could close the museums. Excuse me. So what that said to me is that museums need to work a little harder on defining and establishing the value that they deliver, which is, I would argue, really should be central value. We need to create value, and you can't just tell people you're valuable. Value is always relative, and in particular, you need to convince people like this. This, by the way, I love this picture. I took this off the internet. This This is a picture of EU commissioners, but they could be the board of any foundation or any, government council anywhere that you might see. They're really sincere, earnest, good people, but they aren't going to just say, well, I'm glad you think you're useful and valuable. Show me the evidence. So what does it take to convince these people? And in part, I come to this current position that I'm going to talk about here, having spent literally decades of my life trying to demonstrate the value of museums. And historically, the way I did this was, gosh, I'm a researcher. And so data speaks, right? So I collected tons and tons of data that demonstrated that museums support people's learning and do it as well as any institution in the world. And I have yet to see that argument actually move the dial. So I thought, well, maybe it's time to rethink the problem. So what does it take? So to begin with, people like that, wonderful people, to be honest, they don't really care about preserving precious objects. They don't, and even though they they care about history and learning, not so much. But they are committed to public good. And so you have to convince them that what you're doing is increasing the public welfare somehow. And then the other fact is, whether you like it or not, the currency of policy is money. I mean, if I'm a funder, if I'm a government official, what I have to give is money. And so what I'm trying to do is say, well, there are all these people out there saying they do good for the public. What is it worth? I have to make this choice. So how do I parse this is better than that? So we need to think about it from a monetary point of view. And it's not that there aren't economic studies of the value of museums and the value of museum experiences. But I'll tell you, most of the studies and most of the published stuff, like the American Alliance Museums for years has stuff on their website that museums create all these jobs and museums create all this economic benefit. And I'm thinking, well, that's great. But if I'm the city council and I have money to spend, do you really think that the museum is the place I'm going to say, well, they're the biggest employer in the county? Well, no, they're not. Do we have museums because they create this? They're the economic drivers of the county? No, I don't think so. So we have to define that value in the ways that intuitively people who are inclined to believe that museums are valuable are valuable. And so again, it's about the value of public good. Show me that value. And again, there are studies of the, and I'm a researcher, so I look at the literature. So if you look at the literature on the value of a museum experience, a day's visit to a museum, the values that are in the literature vary by 3 orders of magnitude. Anywhere from $7 is the value of a visit to $3,000, $3,500 actually. I mean, how can that be? 3 orders of magnitude. The problem is, the reason it can vary so much is that none of those studies really had any validity because they asked a bunch of economists to figure this out, as opposed to talking to people who actually know something about museums. And so the assumptions they're making are not valid. So if we're going to come up with a valuation, we have to demonstrate this value in a way that shows universal value. We need to demonstrate it in a way that shows its economic value, but we need to do it based on what we actually understand about why people go to museums and what is the value they derive from going to museums, so that those numbers have some validity. So that's what I set out to do. And what I'm about to talk to you about is how I set out to do that. So I'm going to give you, a whirlwind tour on the theory underlying this, very quickly go through the theory. And then I'm going to present in a little more detail how I actually set about to measure the value. I'm going to give you a case study, and then we're going to talk about the implications of that. So, here, buckle up. So first, theory in a nutshell. So the first thing we know that, and this is something that clearly this institution knows, but unfortunately not all museums know, that in the 21st century, to begin with, the value of these institutions are not in the stuff, the value is in the experiences they create. In fact, that's true in corporate America too. In the middle of the 20th century, the valuation of a corporation, for example, typically was based on the stuff in their warehouse and their manufacturing and land and capital and all that good stuff. Today, those aspects represent less than 15% of the value of most corporations. Most corporations in America, I mean, you think about big companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, they have no stuff. It's all intellectual. It is the experiences they create, and that is true of museums. So what about these experiences? Well, I've studied museum experiences for a long, long time, and one of the things that's really remarkable, and this struck me even when I started 40 years ago, asking people to tell me about their museum experiences, is that regardless of whether people went to a museum a day ago, or 10 years ago, or 50 years ago, they remember it. Museum experiences are really memorable. Now, the specifics can vary all over the place, but the thing that stands out and is really significant is, my God, they're memorable. And that's because, in fact, memorable experiences are really rare. I mean, if you think about it at the moment, how many of you can remember what you were doing at this time a week ago? That's going to be challenging. That was a week ago, let alone a year ago, let alone a month ago. I mean, the truth is, most of the things we do in our day are not memorable. But when you go to a museum, that's memorable. But why is anything memorable? Well, the research suggests that the only things that we really remember are things that are meaningful to us. And if it's meaningful, we'll remember it. If it's not meaningful, we forget it. Okay, well, that's great. So what makes something meaningful? So what makes something meaningful is if it really affects your life, your well-being. It somehow influences you. And as I will talk about this, there are good biological reasons for this. But just except for the moment, the things that are meaningful are likely to affect well-being. Okay, so now we're building up some logic here. So what is well-being? So well-being is actually equal to fitness. Now, well-being is a term today that lots of people use in lots of different ways. In fact, there are some people who, in fact, in the popular culture, well-being has almost come to be seen as a synonym of happiness. Well, happiness is part of it, but that's not really the essence of well-being. The essence of well-being is actually, related to this dude here, it's about survival of the fittest, that fitness is well-being. We do things that help us ensure that we survive and are successful as people. And so here's the big leap. So hard to understand why, but for some reason people think that going to museums support feelings of fitness, of well-being. So that's the logic. So let me talk to you about well-being. Again, it's not really about happiness. I mean, people are really complex, and we have evolved tens of thousands of ways to support our well-being. But all those various ways fall into four basic categories, dimensions of well-being, or at least I would argue that they do. So what are these four dimensions? Okay, so the first one I have called personal well-being. And what is personal well-being? Personal well-being is, and this is the most recently evolved, and it is unique to humans, many of these others are not unique to humans. Personal well-being is, we like to feel a sense of awe and wonder and understanding of the world around us. We like to have a sense of identity. We like to be able to feel good about who we are as people, and we like to have that feeling be expansive. And so personal well-being is all about not only having this sense of understanding of myself in the world, but what's possible about being able to be creative, to be spiritual, to see my place in a larger space beyond the here and now. And so people spend a lot of time, not as much as some people would think, but we still spend a lot of time worrying about these aspects of our well-being. And actually, when we do that, it makes us feel really good. But we also have this dimension, intellectual well-being. People are fundamentally curious. We are learning creatures. But there's a purpose to that. We like to understand why what we did affected what's happened in the present. We like to learn in order to predict the future. And in particular, we like to be able to have some choice and control over our world. And so we derive great satisfaction from feeling like we understand the world in which we live. There's this whole dimension of social well-being. We are fundamentally social creatures. Most of us spend virtually all of our life surrounded by people. There are people who live in our houses with us. We go to work. We spend our days interacting with people. We derive satisfaction from feeling part of that group, feeling part of our family, feeling part of our larger social group. And we like to belong to those groups, feel belonging to those groups in the sense that we care about the people in those social groups and they care about us. And actually, we appreciate getting recognition for and having some sense that others appreciate us within that social network. And then finally, we're also physical creatures. And like every physical creature, we need to eat and we need to sleep and we need to drink and we need to have shelter, and we like to be inside where it's warm when it's cold outside, and we like to be inside when it's raining so that we're not out in the rain, all those good things. And we also like to be in places that we feel are safe and secure. That's also part of our physical well-being. And guess what? Lo and behold, turns out that museums and museum-like places like Conner Prairie have the capacity to support all four of those dimensions of well-being. Not every dimension, not all the time, but in profound ways. So, museums are places where you can go and learn about the world and learn about your place in the world. They're clearly places where you can have awe and wonder and see the way things are that are different than what you would normally see in the day-to-day life. They're places where you go to learn, where you can express your curiosity and learn about other people as well as yourself. They're places where you can go with other people and be part of a social group and feel like you are bonding as part of that social group. And there are places we go because they are physically safe, secure, and to be honest, particularly in today's world, there are often places we can go where we can get away from the day-to-day crowds and urban stuff and all the noise and whatever, and feel like we can sort of decompress and recharge ourselves. And these are the values, these are the benefits that over years people have talked about they derive from going to museums. And guess what? You can measure these things. And you can actually not only measure them, you can ultimately determine their value. And that's what I did. But here's the deal. Unlike the way, again, most people are currently measuring well-being, how many of you heard about these annual happiness surveys of well-being? So, basically, once a year, somebody asks you, do you feel better this year than you did last year? Well, to be honest, you can't answer that question. Do I feel better this year than I did last year? It's like saying, do you feel healthier today than you did a year ago? Well, I don't know. I can tell you whether I feel healthier today than I did yesterday. I can even tell you if I feel healthier today perhaps than I did a week ago. But the farther out you go, the sketchier that answer is going to be. That's because well-being, for better or for worse, is ephemeral. We are constantly trying to ensure that we have positive well-being. We try to work and make sure that we're healthy. We try to make sure that we're satisfied. We try and make sure that we have good relationships with our social group. But, I have an argument with my wife last night, and I feel terrible the next day. And so my well-being has crashed. But then I make up with my wife, and my well-being is restored. It's great. And so, we're constantly in these flux. And so, if you really want to measure well-being, you can't measure it on an annual basis. It's not that way. It's not a place that you attain. It's an ongoing journey. And so we can look at a specific museum experience and try to capture that moment. So when you went to the museum last weekend with your kids, how did that make you feel? We can talk about that. People can reliably and validly talk about whether the experiences they had in a particular museum experience enhanced their well-being or not. But if you remember, since way back there in the theory, that the more memorable something is, the more valuable it is. So for example, if I ask you, right after you're eating an ice cream cone, what do you think of that? Oh, that was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. If I ask you about the ice cream cone 2 weeks later, or a year later, you're going to look at me and say, what ice cream cone? I don't even remember that. So the trick in terms of measurement is we need to push out that timeline because we want to get those longer-term memories. But if we push it out too far, it gets harder to find and talk to people and all that. So in terms of the way I went about doing this, I decided to pick a month out. So we talked to people a month after their visit to a museum. And recently I did 2 large studies. One in the United States, it was all with art museums, 11 art museums, and one in Finland, which had 8 museums. I'm going to talk about the Finnish one, despite the fact that I have US data, but the Finnish one is more relevant to this place because 3 of those museums were history museums. Several of them were art museums, a couple were science museums, but it's a more generic mix of museums as opposed to just being art museums. But to be honest, I got pretty comparable data from the US art museums as well. So 8 Finnish museums. If your Finnish is better than mine, you can maybe make sense of all these. So here's the methodology. 6 steps. You got to recruit people, and we're going to talk to them a month later. But given that we're talking to them a month later, we have to recruit a lot of people because there's going to be some attrition along the way. And then what we did was we sent these people a month later one of 2 surveys. And this was, the wonder of software. The software randomly assigned people to either you get survey 1 or you get survey 2. Survey 1 was, when you went to the museum a month ago, did you have this experience? Yes or no? And if yes, how long did it last? Did it last an hour or 2? Did it last a day? Did it last a week? Did it last 2 weeks? Did it last a month or more? The other folks got a survey to say, when you have a leisure experience, people have these kinds of experiences. If you've ever had this kind of experience, what was it worth to you? What was it worth to you if it lasted an hour or 2? What was it worth to you if it lasted a day, a week, 2 weeks, a month? And of course, for the Finns, we asked them to make that case in euros. And here in the US, we did it in dollars. But when I show you the data, Even though it's Finnish, I converted it to dollars, which amazingly at the time, because of the economy, world economy, the euro was almost the exact equivalent of a dollar. That hasn't happened since the euro was established. Probably won't happen again. But in fact, those of you who travel, amazingly, the British pound, my God, its almost value is close to a dollar, which is outrageous. Poor Brits. Any rate, I digress. We can measure, we get those two baseline data, we combine them so that we can actually then calculate not only the mean value that people had for these experiences, but we can calculate the mean dollar or euro value of that. And then with that, you say, okay, so this is the value of a single visit. Well, then you can determine what the value of all the visits are. And you can actually divide that by the cost of running the organization, and you can actually get that ratio, that cost-benefit analysis. So here's some data. So, visitor recruitment. So, 8 museums, we intercepted a lot of people, 5,500, nearly 5,500 people. And about 70% of them agreed to do a survey. They gave us their name, they gave us their email address, and we thanked them, and then a month later, they got emailed a survey, one of these two surveys. And about half, 50% of them, responded to those two surveys. About 2,000 people in the sample. A little short of 1,000 for survey 2, because that's a little more challenging survey to complete, and then about 1,200 people for that first survey. But those are good numbers for doing statistics and all that kind of good stuff. So here's what we found. So first of all, we asked people, we had in terms of well-being, we had 16 questions, 4 different questions for each of these 4 dimensions of well-being. And each of those 16 questions was, again, based on the research, 30 years of research on how people describe their museum experience. So I didn't make up these things. I just took people's words. So this is how, I like to go to museums because they help me get to know my family. I like to go to museums because I find out about things that I'm curious about and interested in. I like to go to museums because they, I can escape the day-to-day hassle of the world. I like to go to museums because they help me find out more about myself as a person. And so these are the kinds of dimensions. We then, instead of 16 questions, we reduced those to these 4 categories. And what those mean is, so 1 means not at all, 6 means a month or more, but most of those are on the order of 3 to 4. So 3 means that experience lasted about a day. 4 would be that experience lasted a week. And so you can see in terms of personal and intellectual well-being, the experience they had at the museum lasted several days. And in the case of social and physical well-being, they lasted for about a day. And for the more family-oriented museums, more the science museums and history museums, actually social well-being was much higher. That number was reduced because most people don't seem to go to art museums to spend time with their family. Go figure. And that was nearly 40% of the sample. So we could then combine those numbers with the data we got on valuation, and here's where it starts getting interesting. So here we have these really interesting values that personal well-being was worth about $250, intellectual $230, social $217, $218, and physical $217. And I need to explain what this means. And the reason I summed them at the end is that 99% of these couple thousand people, 11, 1,200 people, only about 1% said, I had no positive experiences. 99% said, I had a positive experience. And about 95% of them, or 97% of them actually, said, not only did I have a positive experience, I had a positive experience across all these dimensions. And so actually the benefits from museum going are not just one of these, they're all of them. We derive all of these benefits, some of them more, some of them less. And by the way, there was variability in the value that people got. Again, there were a few people, it's a really small handful, who said, I didn't have any of this benefit. There were a lot of people who said, I had these benefits, and not only did I have them for a day, I had them for weeks. And some people said they lasted a month or more. But again, the averages were what I gave you. So $916 value I'm claiming for a visit to a museum. So what does that mean? So in the world of economic valuation, there are two kinds of value, what are in the biz called market value and economic value. And I'm talking about economic value here. So market value. So the example I like to give, and I can't get my ring off at the moment, is this is my wedding ring. Okay. So if I took this wedding ring to a pawn shop and said, what do you give me for it? Well, the person who runs the pawn shop would take this ring and he'd look at it and he'd say, well, it's a silver ring, put it on a scale, say it's so many ounces of silver. He'd get out his little calculator and say, well, so many ounces of silver is worth this amount of money. Well, this rock isn't worth anything. So I'll give you $20 for this ring. Okay. Well, clearly, that's the market value. That's what, that's basically what that pawn shop would give me for this. But the value of this ring to me is not $20. To begin with, this is like the fourth or fifth iteration of this ring. It keeps breaking, I keep remaking it. The stone keeps falling out, I keep replacing the stone. I bought the original ring in Spain. As I say, I've had it remade a whole bunch of times. Plus it has all this sentimental value to me. So this ring is not worth $20 to me. This ring is worth a lot to me, thousands of dollars perhaps, but at a minimum, $1,000, I would say. That's the economic value of this ring, is what you would be, what its value to you is, that whole package in terms of what sentimental, emotional, all the value packaged together, that's the economic value. And that's what we're measuring here, is the economic value of these museum experiences. It's not what someone may be willing to pay. I don't think anyone's going to be willing to pay $915, $16 to come as admission price to Conner Prairie. But you can believe that when they look at the total value that it brings to them in terms of their life, yes, that's worth $917. That's the message that I'm trying to convey here. So, yeah, that's great. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Because, of course, museums like Conner Prairie don't have just one visitor. They have tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of visitors. So the real value that Conner Prairie is creating is not just $916 per person. It's creating that value for all the people that they serve. It's that cumulative value. And so when we look at that, so we took that 917, so we had these 8 museums, and on average, they had something like 274,000 guests a year. So we're talking $250 million worth of value created on average by each of those museums in economic value. Again, not what people would pay to get in, but the perceived public value that they were creating. The average cost of that, running those museums, finished museums have much lower budgets than the U.S. museums, I've discovered. It was about $8.5 million, which creates a cost-benefit number there of nearly 30%, 3,000%. Well, let me provide some context for this. So first of all, most of us are used to having a leisure experience that gives us value immediately. So we go to a movie. We don't expect that movie to create a value for us for years. We expect to be entertained for the time we're at the movie. And that is the norm for most leisure experiences. They give you value for the time you're engaged in it. because if they don't, they're not worth the price of admission. And at most, maybe double. But here we're creating experiences that for the average person, we were creating value that lasted days, and obviously for some people, weeks and months. So we're doing much better than the norm, just in terms of the value created. And when we look at this in terms of this cost benefit, the research on nonprofits is typically, now in the for-profit world, if you did a really hardcore cost benefit analysis, actually 10% is considered a good return on investment. You know, get 10 cents on every dollar that you generate. So $1.10 in value for a dollar invested is a good investment. But in the nonprofit world, you know, we like to think that we are delivering real value. So we're delivering at least $2 for every dollar created. That is considered excellent in the nonprofit world. So when you're creating something like nearly 20 times that, that's real significant value for the dollar. In other words, museums are creating experiences that create significant value for people. So, in conclusion, we could begin to reframe that we're not merely supporting people's learning, we are. We're not merely helping people understand their history, we are. But what we are doing is we are supporting the basic needs of humans, just like every other part of society. We have police because they keep us secure. We have hospitals because they keep us healthy. We have museums because they support the well-being of our personal, intellectual, social, and physical well-being. We are creating and supporting the same basic needs that everybody in society needs. And this is a fundamental human value that we are creating. This isn't esoteric, this is fundamental. And we're doing it in a significant way that generates millions of dollars of value in a cost-effective manner. And so we aren't wasting the taxpayers' money. We aren't wasting our donors' money. We are doing it effectively and efficiently in a way that delivers significant value. And again, does it in a way that supports that public value in an economically sound manner. And we can make that case now. So what this means is not only can we talk about this value that museums create in new ways, it also gives us insights to think about how we can improve the value. We can understand how we are supporting our current visitors and thinking about how we could better support their value, their needs, their basic needs, understanding why they've come to the museum and how we can now help them deliver on what the expectation they had for coming here in the first place. And we can also have insights into why and how we can support people who don't currently come to the museum. Because everybody has these same needs. Everybody is looking for ways to support their intellectual, their personal, their social, their physical needs. Not everybody supports those needs in exactly the same way. So if people aren't coming, I would argue the reason they're not coming is they don't see this as a place that would support those needs. So we can use this as a tool to get better at thinking about how can we actually support those needs and do it in a way that those people will find satisfying and worth their time and then worth their investment, both in terms of paying admission, but again, their time. So that's my story. And those of you who want to talk to me afterwards, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. But I am excited that what this is allowing us to do is to give us a different way to begin to think about how we talk about the work we do and how we can extend that work and the value to many, many more people in society. Thanks.
An adventure at Conner Prairie has allowed these families to experience all different kinds of history and interactive opportunities.
We'll have the opportunity for our kids to really engage and get their hands dirty with participating with nature.
And having access to the arts is very important. You know, just have this area and space to just be open to communicate and have dialogue and learn.
Conner Prairie has always been a place of fun and education, but it's also a place that the family can go together and make memories. But we always have to keep coming back because it keeps changing.
So we've seen all kinds of great innovation come out of this area, and in Spark Lab we're going to hopefully create the next generation of kids who see the problems they want to solve and find new solutions.
It's really been, you know, one of those partnerships that has just, as it's grown, been enriching for all.
My first exposure to Conner Prairie was in the 4th grade. I came here on a field trip, and I remember watching the potter, absolutely fascinated, watching his hands create something functional from a blob of clay. And it's one thing that I've really grown to appreciate as I've started working here, are all the different ways that we have to connect with people.
On over 1,000 acres, there's just so many opportunities to engage. We know that spending time outside, spending time literally in the sun, and then engaging in physical activity are all things that positively contribute to mental health. We're fortunate that getting campers on the White River, getting them to canoe on our pond on property, swimming on property. There's very few places that you can have the variety of experiences that you get with programs like Conner Prairie Adventure Camp or Weekend Camp. Getting kids out and active contributes to their overall well-being, but it also contributes to their mental health.
I personally was a homeschool mom for many years. But what I learned is that if we took nature breaks, if we took walks, when we went back home to study, their attention spans were longer. Maybe it wasn't just my children who needed that experience, but it could potentially work for other children in our community. And so I initiated the Explore program. Children that we serve are mainly from Marion County. Because they're urban settings, they don't have a lot of green space. And we are hosting the Explore program here at Conner Prairie, reconnecting urban youth and youth of color to blue and green spaces. To give them an opportunity to understand that this is who we are as a people. It has always been a part of our culture, to help them understand that it's a part of their identity.
You know, this is truly a unique place where families can create a really cool memory together. For the families that we serve, there's an added layer of worry and concern and financial burden. Coming out to an adventure and having fun where they just get to relax and enjoy, make a memory. That's the most important part. Gives these families a break. They don't have to think about where are they gonna park or how much are the tickets gonna cost? We take care of all of that with our partners like Conner Prairie to make sure that burden is just released from them.
It's amazing for me to come in and see kids inventing. I see kids really practicing the skills of collaborating, of taking risks, and really everything we need kids to do for the future. We don't know what future jobs we're going to create, but we know it's going to involve a lot of change. We're excited to welcome Conner Prairie into the Spark Lab network. It's already a Smithsonian affiliate museum, but with the Spark Lab, it's joining an elite group of 10 museums around the United States that have these hands-on spaces. Kids really get a chance to create something new, to invent, to solve a problem. Invention has a purpose. It's solving a problem we have today and in the future.
All of our programs aim to facilitate this guided self-discovery. The last 2 summer intensive programs have been in support of the building of Promised Land is Proven Ground. But last year, all we had was the theme. We knew we wanted to talk about Frederick Douglass, and we knew we wanted it in rhythm, rap, and jazz. Everything that was created by the students. It was really cool to see, to be a teaching artist and really just watch them come into their own. You know, the other cool thing has been the body of artists that we've been able to introduce to Conner Prairie, and the opportunities that Conner Prairie has been able to engage our artists with, whether it's being an interpreter, whether it's working on the new exhibit. I don't know that I have the adequate words to really describe like what this experience has been as far as like being a part of and the development of Promised Land is Proven Ground, and understanding the implications, right? Understanding that this is a fixture and it will live beyond. So there's an obligation to get it right.
I wanted to make sure that it was something that would last and that would integrate into just the pathway that is set forth, you know, for everything else that's to come for Conner Prairie. I wanted to provide something that was fun, you know, something that changed people's perspective and narratives when it comes to bees. Their role in society is very important. You know, they are the workers, they are the pollinators. In the smallest ways that are so major, they keep the ecosystem flowing. Bees are kind of stigmatized the same way, you know, if we can think about people from the African diaspora or, you know, Black people, African American people. It's that same stigma. You know, we have the worker bees, we have people that helped build society in a very major way, but you have so many people that have, you know, stereotypical views or negative aspects. Ultimately, I wanted to just provide that positive experience and just a sprinkle of joy.
We worked very hard at listening and observing our guests to figure out what interests them the most, and that's where we meet them. You know, for instance, people come to Mary Prairie to enjoy their time together as a family. I remember sitting around the fire. I was a rowdy during Mary Prairie. And a family came in and sat down on the bench next to us, and the older children were not interested. And it didn't deter us. We went on ahead and just had a ball, singing songs, telling stories. And I noticed that the oldest had put her phone away. And by the time we were done, she was singing. And later that evening, I saw this family walk by again, and that young lady waved at me and locked eyes with me and mouthed the words, "Thank you."
My family came to Mary Prairie this Christmas, and my girls loved it. The lights, seeing the people, but most of all the Cranky show. And they were so inspired that we went home with paper and boxes and gift wrap rolls, made their very own Cranky TV that they can crank, and then they edited the song and rewrote it so that they have a magic train going around and around the world looking for landmarks all over.
To me, it's really developed an interest in history for a number of generations in the family. My children and grandchildren wanted to know more and learn more about what it was, and so they kept learning new things and wanting to come back.
As a child, I was always so excited when I got here. I couldn't wait to get to the schoolhouse. Now, as a parent, it's exciting because each time we come, my kids are fascinated by something different.
Of course, without our guests, the communities that we reach, the communities that come, we would be nothing more than a bunch of empty buildings. The fact that people do come, the fact that we have these partners that extend our reach into communities that we normally wouldn't have, helps us accomplish our mission.
Can I just say, wow, what a great video that truly demonstrates the impact that Conner Prairie has had on our community this past year. Kevin, I told you earlier, and I mean this, the words that you spoke, especially there at the end, just encapsulated what this past year has been about, so thank you for that. Inspiring curiosity and fostering learning by providing engaging and individualized experiences for everyone. That's what we do. This is more than a mission statement to our staff, to our board, donors, and volunteers. This is our mission in action, and we do it each and every year. So I want to thank everyone that participated in creating this impact video, but more importantly, I want to thank everyone that participated in 2022 to create this type of impact on our guests. Thank you, Dr. Falk, for presenting today's keynote that demonstrates how positive museum experiences enhance well-being. I can say that hearing your words and seeing this impact video makes me feel very proud and humbled to be the leader of Conner Prairie, and it helps me understand that Conner Prairie is absolutely on the right track. We want to thank all of our Conner Prairie supporters who have allowed Conner Prairie to continue to find ways to connect with our community and deepen our roots throughout 2022. You've allowed us to truly seek ways to change the way people view and use museums like Conner Prairie. So we not only have over a $50 million economic impact on the state of Indiana, but we have tens of millions of dollars worth of social impact on the guests that are here. We put those together, and Conner Prairie can truly change the world, and that's what we want to continue to do. Now, as I reflect back on 2022 through this video and the annual report that you're going to be receiving as you leave this morning, I'm reminded how much work that we've done this past year and activating this year of 2023, and really what we're going to be doing beyond in our next strategic plan that we're working on this year. Marvin Blade is chair of our strategic planning committee, and we've started the process of creating a new strategic framework for 2024 through 2026. And I can tell you the things that you've heard today, the things that Dr. Falk has been talking about, are things that Conner Prairie will continue to move forward on. More than ever, we're realizing the values that museums provide to the community through national research, like what Dr. Falk has been talking about. We participated in the MOMSI study, which is Measurement of Museum Social Impact. We did this by partnering with the Utah Division of Arts and Museums on this national study to evaluate the social impact museums have on their communities. So we've been exploring the measurements related to health and well-being, continued education and engagement, and valuing diverse communities and strengthening relationships. And this study, both individually for Conner Prairie and the cumulative study of over 30 museums that have participated, has been very revealing to us as we continue to think about this year and the changes we want to make, and more importantly, the changes we'll be making in the next strategic plan. As we look forward in 2023, we have several Prairie Pathway projects that are under or nearing completion. Promised Land is proving ground will be completed and open this summer, and the first phase of the Oxbow Trail will open later this fall. Talk about physical well-being, 2.5 miles around the Oxbow for our guests to enjoy. In 2024, we'll begin construction on renovating and expanding the Welcome Center to become a true year-round museum experience center that will leverage our Smithsonian partnership and further enrich the lives of all of our guests. As we think about 2023, we have several things that we're commemorating. As a matter of fact, 200 years of the William Conner home and 200 years of Hamilton County and Noblesville. Next year, we look forward to 50 years of Prairie Town being open as a historic village. What a wonderful anniversary. And in 2026, the 250th anniversary of American independence. What an awesome time to be a museum like Conner Prairie, to be able to share our history, both locally and nationally, to global audiences. And as we create a digital twin of Conner Prairie, hopefully by the end of 2025, going into early 2026, we'll be able to share this information with everybody in the world, truly changing the way the world views and uses museums. So we really look forward to activating all of these things this year and moving forward, and we look forward to the continuing support that you give us as donors, board members, staff, volunteers, and we really think that the future is going to be bright because of your involvement, the people that are in this room. I hope that you've enjoyed this glance back at 2022, how we've activated the future, how we've deepened our roots, and how that will just continue to grow and multiply for years to come. I hope that you have safe travels today and enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you.